that's less than 1%. When we're thinking about the successes of prisoners who participate in programs like that, have we done any kind of research or studies to look at the recidivism if they've gone through a program like that? So what do we know about that?
So CalPIA keeps very good statistics on their own with regard to their program and the success. In addition, the other thing that is going to be available to the inmates there that are not inmate workers is we have vocational programs, we have educational programs, we have limited vocational programs, we have educational programs that inmates will be able to participate, and other jobs that wouldn't necessarily be something that CalPIA would be able to take advantage of.
The reason why I'm asking you these questions is we talked about the 18.8 million. In that dollar amount, did we take a look at the opportunity costs and factor in the success rate? So while it may cost more in the current costs, the value that we receive by giving a person an opportunity to return to society as a valuable member may outweigh it because we're not reincarcerating them. So was that taken into consideration?
I don't believe the cost estimate of $18.8 million included a recidivism reduction component to the cost of that program.
When we're moving forward on things like this, that's going to be a line of questions that I'm going to have in the future, because if we're serious about adding programs that work, I think that this is one of those items that if it doesn't work, then we should address it. But if it is working, it needs to be factored into the decision process. And while you know, I'm certainly supportive of the opportunity that Pride gives to workers, on the flip side, it's our goal to ensure that people don't return to prison.
So just to provide a little bit of clarification, that in concept, one of the benefits was, you know, people getting employment experience, which hopefully would reduce recidivism once they were out. And we have a budgeting methodology that when fewer inmates are in prison, we have a way to take down savings related to their feeding, clothing costs. So as that materializes over time, those savings should be reflected in the budget.
As I said, we don't need to take action. The contract is already in place.
Do you need a motion?
No. But I think we would be interested in a report next year, and I hope we don't have to, I hope everything will go well. So the next item is the healthcare supervisory positions. The governor's budget proposes a $12 million increase and 68.6 positions in the executive and supervisory staffing levels throughout the prisons. Mr. Receiver.
Yes, Madam Chair. This has been an issue that I've gone back and forth on over the years. When we initially decided that it would be a good idea to provide chief executive officers for healthcare at institutions, I was convinced we needed to have leadership on healthcare at the institution that will be essentially at the same level as the warden. Early on, in an attempt to save money, frankly, staff pointed out to me that we have these institutions that are close to each other, and maybe we should first roll out CEOs at institutions that were located far away from each other, and then at these institutions where they're close to each other, let's try to have a CEO who splits his or her time, as well as other executive staff members between two institutions. It seemed to me like it was an experiment worth trying. Because there's an expense associated with having a full executive team at each institution. I simply think that the experiment shows that when you split your leadership between two institutions, you end up with inadequate leadership at both institutions. One institution or both inevitably suffer from the absence of a CEO and executive leadership at the institution. As the committee knows, prisons are, in California in particular, are very large, very complex organizations. And I think what we've learned here is that they require full-time executive leadership in the same way that you have a full-time warden at every institution. So at this stage, I would like to see full staffing of leadership at these institutions.
Okay, thank you. LAO?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jonathan Peterson from the LAO. So we did raise some concerns with the supervisory staffing proposal, and we are recommending that the legislature reject the $6 million that would go towards providing these standalone executive management teams at each institution, and I'll give you a little more details on why that's the case. So right now, 5 of the 7 institutions that share responsibility have gone through OIG inspections and have received adequate levels of care. We note that adequate levels of care is not the same as the receiver delegating an institution as having a constitutional level of care. But we have not had a pair of these institutions that share executive management teams go through their OIG inspections and have a review from the receiver saying that care can be provided at these institutions with shared management teams, or that care cannot be provided with these shared executive management teams. So at this point, given that there are so many inspections left on the table to take place, as the receiver noted, all of the inspections for this round should be concluded by the end of the calendar year, that the need for each institution to have a standalone executive management team is not justified, and that without giving some more justification and having some more information as far as these inspections are concerned, that approving the portion of the supervisory staffing model that goes towards having these standalone executive management teams is premature. So for that reason, we're recommending that the legislature not go forward with the $6 million that would be required for these executive management teams, but the other pieces of this proposal that are included in the supervisory staffing model, we don't raise concerns with.
Tabitha Stout, Department of Finance. We'd just like to note, as the receiver previously mentioned, that having separate executive teams at each institution is important to the operation of the healthcare system as a whole, and will support the successful transition of healthcare back to the state.
Got it, one on this. So we're spending $20,000 per inmate on healthcare. So if you had a facility with 1,000 people, it'd be like $20 million worth of healthcare out there. And who's managing the $20 million of the bundle of healthcare that we give people? Is that the executive? So you're saying that if we have 2, say we have a facility with 3,000 people, that's $60 million on the average, right? So you're kind of looking at somebody to manage $60 million or so if they have 3,000 inmates. Is that, I'm just being general, not
I'm a lawyer,
specific.
not a mathematician, but those numbers, numbers sound.
We're the budget committee, okay?
Those numbers sound right.
Am I missing something here?
I don't think you're missing something, and for me, it's part the money, and it's part the leadership that you need to make organizational change and culture improvements happen. So if you look at the committee report, the first institution that happens to be listed is High Desert State Prison and California Correctional Center.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to say that everything in High Desert is because they had split CEO leadership, but that didn't help. I just think it's about having leadership at very large institutions that, as you point out, have a $30 million
Now,
budget.
when we did this split thing, when did we do that? A couple years ago?
That was some time ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, where we decided that one person would manage 2 or 3 facilities in some cases.
So back in the day, there was a time when wardens actually, we had split wardens for some of our newer
okay.
facilities. So corrections actually tried this back in the 80s. When we built Solano State Prison, the warden was actually overseeing CMF in Solano. So they kind of went through the same thing that we went through in terms of trying to manage 2 facilities with 1 person. They found out early on that for them it didn't work, and we have experienced the same thing. But the CEOs that are there now, we have had a split CEO model since the beginning of the receivership.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to kind of clarify what kind of more,
Right.
it's a management issue is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam Chair. Aye. Senator Anderson. Aye. Senator Bell. Aye.
To number 4, which is increased pharmaceutical costs. A $20 million general fund increase this year and $27 million for next year and on an ongoing basis. So, Mr. Receiver?
Yes, so this budget proposal is to increase our budget for the cost of drugs that have gone up quite significantly over the past 2 years since we've talked about this item. And in addition, we are looking for a way to develop an ongoing adjustment that we can do in our budget, such as a population adjustment, because the increase of prices that we see in drugs isn't necessarily something that we can know ahead of time. And a good example is this last year, we received a 24% increase in the price of insulin from the manufacturer that provides insulin to our institution. With institutions, with the increase of people that need to have insulin services, this actually increased our insulin costs 36% in 1 year.
Okay. LAO?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do agree with the general approach of the proposal that incorporates the use of a pharmaceutical consumer price index to help aid with estimating these uncertain pharmaceutical costs moving forward. We do have we do raise some issues regarding the methodology used that I'll go over and recommend holding off on approving the pharmaceutical increases related to using that new methodology until we have that information.
Okay.
So just if I could, the approach uses the information from past years to determine what increases in that index should be used to estimate the cost moving forward. We think there's a slightly better methodology that the receiver and the department could use as they're developing this more complete model that incorporates population as well as patient acuity, similar to what they do with their medical classification model for staffing. And specifically what we recommend they use is, instead of using past information on this index, that they incorporate projections that are available for the pharmaceutical consumer price index to better estimate the future costs for pharmaceutical drugs moving forward. Our recommendation is that the legislature hold off on taking action until the receiver can provide information regarding an updated estimate of the current year monthly pharmaceutical expenditures and an updated estimate of the pharmaceutical consumer price index that would be used to estimate these costs for the current year and budget year using these most recent projections that are available.
Okay. Department of Finance.
So at the time we developed these projections, we didn't have access to the CPI projections. And we also note that this is still a work in progress. So this is our first step towards developing a more robust model and a more dynamic model that will change with in regards to the inmate population and the patient acuity, and that's what we're actually striving for.
Okay. Are there questions from members of the subcommittee? Are there any public comment on this? Seeing and hearing none, would the receiver like to respond to the LAO concerns?
Madam Chair, this
Otherwise, I would recommend we hold it open.
A methodological conversation between LAO
Great.
and finance and my experts that I'm happy to have continue. But I don't see a reason to hold up this request for appropriation for that conversation to be concluded. This is going to be a long-term problem. It requires careful consideration.
It will. So,
Just to clarify, if I may, Madam Chair, that we're asking to hold off until the information is provided by April 1 so that it can be included when the budget's finalized at May revision.
So to be clear, the actual intention is to do this twice a year with the department's population adjustment. So we will be coming forward in the May revision with an update to expenditures and to information. There are technical nuances to the LAO's recommendation that could make that challenging, and because we're so new in the process, committing to this projection or using that methodology and not knowing the long-term methodology, we're kind of a little reticent to do that, but we'll kind of continue to take that information into consideration and do our best to estimate these costs.
okay, I appreciate that. And so I'm going to suggest that we hold it open till the May revise and we try to get the information by April 1st and we have the discussion between the parties so that we can get on with making the best estimates we possibly can. Okay, our fifth item is item number 5, and it is an oversight item related to recruitment and retention of medical personnel, which has been a major issue and challenge for us in our prison system. And the receiver, I hope, has an update on the recruitment efforts.
A very quick update. I'll be turning it over to Ms. Hayhoe momentarily. The background history here is that when we began with the receivership, we had initially one of the largest recruiting and HR shops in state government because we had such a distance to travel. Several years ago, probably 4 years ago now, we decided that we had, looking at our map of California, we had green in almost every place. And I declared victory and said it's time to reduce the size of the resources for recruitment and retention. We reduced them a little bit too much and started seeing problems in the last year and a half in retaining people and in recruiting. The legislature last year did authorize some resources to bring us up just a little bit. And the good news is that we are seeing direct and immediate impacts from those additional resources. We are having we now have the ability to have targeted recruitment efforts. We've been able to commit resources. Once we have somebody who is nibbling a little bit, we're able to commit a resource to helping that person through the months-long process of getting them to the point where they can actually come on board. That has helped us tremendously in converting possible applicants into employees. So we're doing much better in improving the yield of our potential employees. So overall, it is working quite well, including even at CHCF, where we now are very close to full staffing of that institution, which addresses one of the last remaining problems that we saw in Stockton as of a year ago. Joyce, do you have anything you want to add to that?
So yeah, with the resources that we were provided last year, we created a centralized hiring unit that now has statewide responsibility for looking at hard to recruit classifications. Most notably, our doctors in areas are very, very hard to recruit. And this comes at a time when the federal loan repayment program has cut back some of the opportunities that we've been able to take care of. So although our centralized hiring unit has been able to do a lot of work towards recruiting our doctors in areas that are easier to recruit, there are still pockets where we do have some problems that we are experiencing for finding physicians to be in our facilities. And there's a really good write-up in the agenda about this item, and we generally agree with what's been said here.
Okay. Yeah, we are interested and concerned about this because we recently, just this very week, had a hearing of the policy committee and the budget committee looking at ways that we can better train and support the staff that we're asking to do often highly stressful, volatile kinds of work. And it seems to me that a loan repayment program, which we're also considering for teachers in our public schools, is a good way to recruit.
Healthcare.
Yeah, and healthcare as well, and hard-to-place places, which our prisons are. So what I don't understand is the exact status right now of the loan repayment program. Is it that it's still going on, but it's been cut back because of the cut in federal funds?
There's both been a cut in federal funds and also with the way that you have to qualify in order to participate, some of our institutions no longer qualify. So they've changed the criteria for how you're able to qualify. So both of those things has led us to not being able to rely on that program as much as we had in the past. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to add that part of what we are experiencing now is that there are other entities now, because we're all going after the use of primary care physicians, for instance. The federal government just recently created a loan repayment program for work at Veterans Affairs. So to the extent that we aren't able to keep up with some of these programs, we're going to have a much harder time being able to recruit primary care physicians to work in our facilities.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it does seem to me that this could be an expenditure. I understand it would cost about $13 million a year to have a fully funded loan repayment program that we could offer. And I think that it would pay off a great deal in the end. But does the LAO have any comments on this issue?
We don't have any comments on whether the proposals that you're referring to is a good idea, but we're more than happy to work on fleshing out the details behind what parts seem to make sense and how the recruitment issues that the receiver's office brings up might be addressed by some sort of incentive payment program, and whether that could be an effective model to help with those efforts.
Well, while college loans are like front and center in everybody's projections of what the world's going to be like in the future, I'd hate to see our correction system left out of a general attempt to recruit people in some of these hard-to-place places. But Department of Finance?
Yes, I think we understand the importance of, being competitive for employment for our healthcare professionals, and understanding that the loan repayment program is one of those tools or solutions that can help us be more competitive. But we prefer not to take such a department-specific approach, because then you start to impact other departments, unintentionally, like Department of State Hospitals, Department of Developmental Services. So really, the more appropriate process to maybe address or look at this issue is through the collective bargaining process that the administration, the legislature, and the unions go through to kind of look at compensation and see if this truly is a need or and a benefit that everyone is interested in pursuing. That is probably the most appropriate forum to address this issue.
Who bargains for the physicians? Who bargains for the physicians in our prisons?
Who bargains?
Well, you said collective bargaining. I just wondered.
Oh,
It would be CalHR
Yeah.
Okay,
and UAPD.
and the
Thank you.
department has a role in that, and we have counterparts in finance that have a role, so it's a pretty real.
Yeah, there are many things that I would like to see in our system that have not been bargained for, unfortunately, because of the priorities of those doing the bargaining, right? I really am interested in how we recruit and retain the very best possible individuals in our system, and would be very happy to include the state hospitals, which frankly, right now, I consider an extension of our prison system, since that's where most of the people in them come from. And so that is a comment. I think it's something that would permanently move us forward, and certainly to consider it in the most complete way. But I would note that even for our teachers, we don't have it because of the way it's bargained, which is district by district. So this might be a way we could lead.
Yeah, and we just want to note that we realize it's an important issue and we're looking at it.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any comments from the public on this issue? Actually, if people could go to the mic, yeah, that's good. Thank you, Ms. Dowden.
I'm Helen Roth-Dowden from SEIU Local 1000, and just wanted to commend the department on a very innovative recruitment and retention plan they have. They're taking LVNs. We've gotten a grant through the community colleges at the Stockton facility to train LVNs to become RNs while they're working. These are mainly women. These are women of color who are heads of households who will double their income when they finally complete. They will also retain, their retention will become less of an issue because they're already working at these facilities and they know what it's like. So they will go from an LVN to an RN, and we wanted to just publicly thank the receiver for working with us on this program.
Thank you. Actually, thank you very, very much for pointing that out, and I'd like to thank the receiver too. I mean, it sounds like a real win-win, and good. We should be doing that in as many of our institutions as possible. Well, I'm going to suggest that we ask our budget staff to develop some language for the administration and the LAO and the budget committee to consider as to doing an expanded and fully funded loan repayment program so that we can recruit professionals that will work in our system for considerable periods of time. And I think we could just ask them to do that.
It's probably cheaper than rehiring people all the time.
It probably is cheaper than rehiring people, and if we could consider it.
You don't have the skill sets.
Right. So thank you. That ends the specific parts of the discussion involving the receiver, but we do have some additional items for the department, and you may want to stay for those if they overlap.
Thank you, members.
Yeah, is the department here? Yeah. The first item we're going to be considering is the governor's proposing $2 million in the general fund to do additional medical coverage in the in-state contract prisons that we run as required by the receiver. So here we are again. CDCR, why don't you walk us through the proposal?
Okay, good morning, Madam Chair and members. Jason Lopez, Deputy Director of Fiscal Services for CDCR. As you mentioned, this request is for $2 million starting in budget year and ongoing to add a half-time physician and 1 FTE LVN at 7 different contract facilities within the state. This includes 6 male community correctional facilities and 1 female community reentry facility. With this augmentation, those facilities will now be staffed with 1 40-hour-a-week physician, 1 40-hour-a-week LVN, and 24/7 RN coverage. As you mentioned, the additional medical staffing was deemed necessary by the federal receiver in order to provide a level of medical care consistent with that provided to those within our correctional system. This determination was a product of a biannual on-site audit conducted by the receiver's private prison compliance monitoring unit, so adds validity to it. I'm joined today by Mr. Jay Verbal of our Division of Adult Institutions and Ms. Hayho, who you've been speaking with for the last couple of hours, and we'd be happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
I just have a